Now at 5, the roster is set for legislation that could become law in Olympia. What survived last night's deadline and what was chalked.
I was disappointed we didn't get it across the finish line this year. We'll try again next year.
Absolutely, the impact could be very, very real for Washington State.
The impact of federal cuts trickling down to Washington's classrooms. The state superintendent breaking down what programs could be affected if funding comes up short. A pride flag in Whatcom County is cut in half by vandals.
There was no beating around the bush about what had happened.
How a community is coming together to support its owner, stitch by stitch. Mount Rainier dominates skylines across Washington state. The name stems from a British explorer, but it's not the only name for this iconic volcano. The new push for a change.
Why are we calling this gorgeous, beautiful mountain after a man that never even was here, you know?
This is King 5 News at 5 with Joyce Taylor.
We begin with breaking news tonight. At least one person is hurt after a shooting at Rocks Hill Park in West Seattle. Police are now searching the area for others involved. King 5's Jim Nelson has just heard from police. He joins us live tonight. So, Jim, what are officers telling you right now?
Well, Joyce, right now the primary concern is on the health of that person who's been shot, taken to Harborview, described as being in serious condition. But there's this overall concern about the fact that just after 2:30 this afternoon, there was reported gunfire at a park, a beautiful park here in West Seattle. But this, we would later find out, was just one of two separate scenes. Some video from earlier shows the second of the two scenes, not quite a mile away on 30th Avenue. According to police, what happened was there were four young males reportedly shooting at each other at the park, and then two of them left in a vehicle and wound up over on 30th Avenue. That's where one of the young men, an 18-year-old, called police to report that his friend had been shot. That was a 17-year-old male who was treated at the scene before being rushed to the hospital. Again, we're told in serious condition. At this point, police still looking for the other two people that were involved in the initial incident at the park. Obviously very concerning for so many people, and that's at the core of it, the fact it was in such a public place.
Well, the most disturbing thing for me that I feel is that it took place in a park. You know, there's play equipment around there could be kids in the area, so that's really disturbing that something like this could happen in a park.
Now, fortunately, we've been told that the park really wasn't being used at the time. Obviously a little chilly. You've had on and off rain, so maybe the good news is the fact that the park wasn't as filled as it could have been on maybe a nice summer day. But still, neighbors already telling me they're worried about that. They said there have been some other incidents in the past. I just talked to another parent who was coming to play frisbee with his daughter. After hearing the news, they simply turned around and decided to go somewhere else. Of course, we'll continue to follow up on this investigation. Police still looking for two other males they believe were involved in this shooting incident in West Seattle. Joyce?
Jim, we'll keep tracking this all evening. Thank you for the latest from West Seattle. Well, we're down to the final 45 days in the legislative session in Olympia, and we now have the final list of the bills that could become law this session. Last night, lawmakers finalized that list of proposals they'll consider for the next 6 weeks. And it means those that didn't make the cut have to try again next year. Our Olympia Bureau Chief Drew Mickelson joining us live tonight from the state capitol to tell us what's still up for debate and what will have to wait. Drew.
Good afternoon, Joyce. Yeah, members of the House of Representatives were here past 2 this morning narrowing down their list. Some of the bills that survived: a bill to boost funding for special education programs, along with a move that would give striking workers unemployment benefits. But one law that likely won't be around after this year is a bill that would change the state's drunk driving threshold. That is one of dozens that appears dead for 2025.
People convicted of crimes as teens and serving sentences into their 20s in overcrowded juvenile detention facilities may be sent to adult prisons. Repeat excessive speeders would have to add devices to their cars to prevent them from going too fast. And developers may get incentives to build apartments near public transportation. Just some of the hundreds of bills still alive. Others on the list, a bill to limit rent increases to 7% a year, making changes to the state's parental rights initiative, and a bill to require permits for someone to buy a gun.
Keep going, go, 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 go.
The push to lower the threshold to determine when a driver is drunk appears dead. One of the bill's sponsors, who thinks the move would have saved lives, says the votes just weren't there.
I think we need a lot more education. We need to make sure our members are comfortable. I think there's a lot of misinformation on what it takes to even get to a .05. People assume it's one drink, and that's absolutely not true.
Other bills on the dead list, offering state-funded PTSD treatment for coroners and medical examiners, and the push to change the signature gathering process for initiatives. The bill that kept the House working until the wee hours, making changes to the Parents' Rights Initiative passed by legislators just last year. Republicans say it's working, but Democrats say educators want clarification. For example, do they have to inform a parent if their trans student reaches out to a counselor?
I think we'll fix that, make it much more clear how schools should be operating, what parents and kids should expect.
It's obviously disappointing because I think that parents in our state are continuing to feel like they are being pushed away from their children, that the state believes that it can do a better job of caring for its children. And that's not a Republican-Democrat issue.
Most of the bills that have passed now go to the other chamber. So the House bills now go to the Senate and vice versa. And of course, no bill can become a law unless it has the governor's signature. So a lot of work still to be done here over the next 6 weeks. Live in Olympia, Drew Mickelson, King 5 News.
Well, we are tracking 3 major headlines from the nation's capital tonight, including new tariff threats from President Trump on imported goods from the European Union, a showdown between parties over a proposal to fund the government past tomorrow's deadline, and a federal judge's ruling on the mass firings of thousands of federal workers across several government agencies. So let's start with new tariffs, potentially. President Trump threatening to impose more taxes on imported goods, this time on alcoholic beverages coming from the European Union. He's threatening a 200% tariff on wine, champagne, and spirits, saying that would go into effect if the EU moves forward with a planned 50% tariff on American whiskey. The EU made that proposition in response to Trump's steel and aluminum tariffs, which are already in effect, plus separate reciprocal tariffs Trump plans to place on the EU in the future. Lawmakers are also facing that deadline to fund the government. It's going to shut down tomorrow if lawmakers in the nation's capital cannot reach a deal. The House has already passed a stopgap spending bill to fund the government through September. If all Republicans in the Senate vote to pass it, they would still need to convince seven Democrats to vote with them.
The Democrats need to decide if they're going to support funding legislation that came over from the House, or if they're going to shut down the government.
What the Republicans are doing is not a CR, it's a license to destroy. There are things in that that are utterly unacceptable, and it's a surrendering of the powers of Congress.
And President Trump says that he will get involved with negotiations if he needs to. To the latest now on those mass firings, a federal judge has ordered the Trump administration to immediately reinstate thousands of employees at federal agencies. Probationary employees were fired last month as part of the administration's effort to shrink the federal workforce. The judge ruled today the Office of Personnel Management unlawfully directed the layoffs. The order applies to half a dozen federal agencies and could be extended to more. And coming up in just 10 minutes, retired 4-star Army General and King 5 military analyst Barry McCaffrey joins us live with his take on President Trump's relationship with the European Union, with Ukraine, statements about making Canada the 51st state today, and the impact on our economy. That's just 5 minutes away at 5:15. Other news tonight. Teachers and education leaders say that federal cuts to the Department of Education will be felt in Washington classrooms. This comes as Washington's Attorney General joins a lawsuit trying to stop the Trump administration from making those changes. King 5's Natalie Swaby joining us live with the concerns that are being raised tonight on this. Natalie.
Well, the state superintendent says on average, about 7% of Washington's public school budgets depend on federal sources. It's a little less than that here at the district in Seattle, but in some of the state's rural communities, more than 40% of school budgets come from federal funds. The cuts coming from the federal government are what concern local special education teacher Shannon McCann.
Yesterday, the student loan website was down. Today, we saw $1 billion cut from school nutrition.
Washington joined a lawsuit with 20 other states to block education department cuts that involve firing 50% of its workforce.
That was the president's mandate. This directive to me clearly is to shut down the Department of Education.
The U.S. Education Secretary talked about the layoffs on Fox News this week.
In a country where we right now have over 8 million openings in jobs, I think there'd be a lot of places for them to go. We'd like to help them get there.
Current U.S. Secretary, she's eliminating staff. I don't think she believes she has the authority to cut the budget. If Congress comes along and does that, you're talking about meals money through Department of Agriculture. You're talking about special ed funds and what we call Title I funds.
The state superintendent says those are dollars that go into high poverty communities. This map shows 5% of federal funding for Seattle public schools is at risk, but the areas in red that include rural and tribal communities stand to lose much more.
The impacts are already real. They could get exceedingly painful if we can't get responsiveness.
This is up to us to call our legislators and say that it is absolutely unacceptable to have any cuts. We need to make sure that the Department of Education is supported.
The 21-state lawsuit that Washington joined argues that cuts will severely impact critical services, particularly for students and families who can least afford it. Live in Seattle, Natalie Swaby, King 5 News.
Well, the Secretary of Transportation and the acting Federal Aviation Administrator visited Boeing's Renton factory today. King 5's Bridget Chavez joining us live outside their Renton factory with the latest on this tonight, Bridget.
Well, Joyce, officials have been very tight-lipped about this visit here today, but we know that it comes at a critical time when aviation safety is top of mind. Officials also say the delegation also met with Boeing CEO Kelly Ortberg. The visit is significant because it comes 6 years after Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 crashed, killing all 157 people on board. That fatal incident followed a similar tragedy just months earlier when a Lion Air flight went down, also killing everyone on board. In the wake of these events, Boeing vowed to improve its quality assurance and safety culture, but the company faced a major setback last year when a door plug blew off a Boeing 737 MAX 9 mid-flight. Aviation experts say visits like this are crucial, and it's important to have these key players in the same room.
I can think of no better proponent of this than the head of Boeing, because in the chaos that Boeing has gone through, they've got to emerge with even a greater understanding of the delicate balance of safety.
We've also learned that Boeing CEO will appear before the Senate Commerce Committee next month. He will talk to them about the efforts here to improve safety culture and quality. Reporting live in Renton, Bridget Chavez, King 5 News.
Well, King 5 is your home of the Seattle Seahawks. The team has formally now introduced the new quarterback who will lead the team into a new era. Paul Sylvie's here with the very latest from the Hawks. Paul.
Well, Sam Darnold walked into a packed auditorium today at Seahawks headquarters. He said he's always heard a lot about the culture in Seattle, especially from those who played here.
You know, they say nothing but great things about this place, and he tried to force out, you know, okay, well, there has to have been something wrong with the place, right? And they're like, no, honestly, there's nothing wrong at all. You know, it rains a little bit. That was like the biggest thing that they said, but no, it's just an unbelievable place, and from what I've heard from so many people and, you know, guys that I've played with in the past in college, Uchenna Nwosu, and then Leonard Williams as well. They speak so highly of this organization, and I'm just so excited, so thrilled to just be able to get the opportunity to play football here and you know, attack every single day with my teammates.
Southern California, your high school days, two-time league MVP, basketball, you know, what, you know, those are some nice times, some special memories for you, but what made you switch from basketball to football? Was there something that clicked?
I was getting Pac-12 offers for football, and I wasn't getting those kind of offers for basketball. I was like, okay, yeah, I probably, you know, I wasn't 6'7", you know, and I couldn't jump out of the gym, so I knew that, you know, I would probably end up playing football. Yeah, I knew my future wasn't in basketball. I think even growing up a little bit, I always kind of dreamt that I would have a future playing college basketball and in the NBA. But yeah, when I capped out at 6'3" and 3/8 or whatever they measured me at the combine, I knew that wasn't in the cards. So
I got to ask you this, because I read up about your grandfather and the fact that he was an actor and he was actually one of the Marlboro men back in the day.
Sure.
And he has a pretty extensive career. And I look at the images of you guys, and does anybody ever say that you look a lot like your grandfather? And that, what's the conversation when he comes up?
Even from what my mom tells me about him, we have very similar personalities. We attack, everything that we do very similarly. And I'm just, I feel like, my family and her side of the family compares me to him a lot. And, but I've never gotten the looks one. I appreciate that. He was a model and Marlboro Man, all these things, and he was an actor. So that's a new one for me. So I'll incorporate that as well.
That's just part of our conversation with Sam. You can see the full interview right now on King 5 Plus. Just download the app on your TV and watch it for free. Colorful
I don't know how
guy,
you find all these little nuggets.
Well,
Love it.
I'm just thankful he played along because I was worried about what he was going to talk about. But very cool, and a lot more football talk with Sam coming up in sports as well.
Looking forward to it. Thanks.
All right.
Well, there's been a string of coyote attacks in Bellevue. It's left at least 3 people injured. Coming up tonight at 5:30, the alert from the Department of Fish and Wildlife about that.
It exploded my heart 10 times.
A message of thanks tonight from the owner of a pride flag vandalized in Whatcom County, how the community worked together to restore a woman's flag and her spirit. First, though, tariff threats and looming ceasefire plans rattle the relationship between the U.S. and Europe. In just 2 minutes, we are live with retired 4-star Army General Barry McCaffrey on the other side of this break.